And I've been a professional photographer for a heck of a long time, 37 years. This is what the main page on my website looks like. And the only reason I'm showing you this is if you look at the bottom here, if you can see my mouse, it says newsletter sign up. And if anybody's interested in signing up to receive my newsletter I send out every 2 weeks, that'd be great. I just got back from a 17-day trip to Yellowstone where I led a couple of safaris. Pretty awesome. So talking about Yellowstone tonight is going to be a lot of fun. All right, the safaris I do are the spring safaris. I do 2 back-to-back safaris. Next year, the schedule will probably change just a little bit, the days, but I do back-to-back safaris, usually separated by Memorial Day weekend. And I do a fall safari and I do a winter safari. And we're going to do this show seasonally. And so we're going to start with the winter safari pictures. I've been shooting in Yellowstone since 1983 was my first photography trip there. So that was 38 years ago. I got published. I wrote an article about visiting Yellowstone got published in November 1985. So that was 36 years ago. I started out doing freelance for magazines, and I've had 1,600 pictures published. I lost count a while back. I've had 18 magazine covers. I've had 35 articles published that I've written. I've sold, and I'm not even sure I keep track of the fine art or the stock sales or anything like that anymore. So I did that. I did freelance wildlife photography for magazines for about 10 years. Then I opened a studio and used the studio for about 11 years. I still did a lot of wildlife photography, but I decided I was tired of being a poor bear photographer, decided to be a wealthier wedding photographer, and did that for 11 years. I shot 800 weddings, 1,000 families, probably just about as many seniors. This is kind of a cool picture. If you look at this pregnant gray wolf, you can see that her belly is hanging down. The black wolf had wounded that elk, which died during the night. And then it was taken over by the coyotes that you saw in the first frame. But there were 8 coyotes, not 2. And one black wolf was not able to defend the carcass from 8 coyotes. And so they eventually drove him off. And his mate here was pregnant. She couldn't get into the fight. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had any trouble beating back the 8 coyotes. You can shoot wolves any season in Yellowstone. We had 2 or 3 really good encounters last week. Matter of fact, I just got back from my Yellowstone safari last night, the Yellowstone trips, and it was a long 17 days being gone. Even though some of these pictures look winter-like, which is why they're in the winter section, like this one was shot in the fall. These wolves killed a pronghorn. It's funny, I posted the image and I said the wolves are eating a pronghorn, and people immediately on Facebook, who always think they know everything, said, oh, that can't be, you must be wrong. Wolves can't catch pronghorn. And the guy that got the best shot, I was driving, the guy in my back seat, right, got a shot of the wolf about 3 feet behind the pronghorn. So I posted his picture and I said, there you go. And the wolf drugged down the coyote and killed it, or drugged down the pronghorn and killed it. So the moral of the story there is people on Facebook are normally wrong. They're not normally right. We shoot a lot of red foxes in the wintertime, both in the Tetons and in Yellowstone. This is a good example of a red fox in the wintertime, Jackson Lake in the background. This is in Yellowstone during blizzards. I love shooting in weather because weather adds a texture to the pictures that they would otherwise lack. And so, when I have a lot of clients on photo safaris, there's always going to be 1 or 2 that goes, oh no, what if the weather's bad? And my reply is always, great. The pictures will look different because we all have fox pictures, and the snow adds an important element to the quality of the image. This is in Yellowstone. This fox was doing a lot of mousing. This is not the same fox. Here he is. He's not so much smelling as he's listening. And whenever you see a scene in a park like Yellowstone or Tetons that has sagebrush, and you don't see the top of the sagebrush, it means that the snow is at least 30 inches to 36 inches deep. So these pictures, the snow is at least 36 inches deep. The mice come up out of the ground into the snow, tunneling into the snow to get to the sagebrush towards the top. And that's when the red fox can hear them underneath the snow. And he gauges using his ears, he gauges the depth into the snow that he needs to go to get to the mouse. And in this picture, the fox is leaping about 6 feet, maybe just a touch more into the air, pile drives himself into the snow, and there he is with the mouse. So they're very successful. They're very good at this. But again, you can tell by no sagebrush that the snow is at least 30 inches deep, if not more. Some parts of Yellowstone has giant sagebrush that's 7, 8, 9 feet tall. But most of the sagebrush in the two parks is just the regular, typical sagebrush. Again, here's another mousing red fox calculating his angle. This was a kind of a lucky shot. This fox had created a den up in some rocks, and in the wintertime, he would go up there and go to sleep in the middle of the day. So he was pretty accessible in terms of photography. Another fox, again, just real cool, real close, shooting this with a 70-200. Most of my photography is with a 500. I recently sold my 500 f4, big, heavy, awkward lens. I bought a 500 PF, Nikon PF 5.6, which has upgraded vibration reduction. Only weighs 3 pounds versus 7 pounds. And I love it. Easier to maneuver in the car, very small, compact, shoots an excellent picture. And I was grateful to make that change. The other nice thing is instead of costing 10 grand, which my previous one had cost, the PF only cost $3,600. So it was quite a reduction in cost for me. I sold my F4 for $3,000. I got the new lens for $3,600. So it only cost me $600. I shot just about every picture on the safari that I just got back. I personally shot about 25,000 images over those 17 days. So we were averaging between 1,500, 2,200 a day. I did have a couple of days of over 5,000 images when we ran into some point blank grizzlies and we ran into some point blank badgers. And so sometimes you can really stack them up. Having a large card, fast card in your camera. I have 3 camera bodies that I'm using right now, Pro Body Nikon D4S, the newer D850, and the D500. I didn't use the D500 a single time on the wildlife safaris. I primarily use it for small birds. I'd much rather use the 46 megapixel 850. I use the D4S. I have an extra battery for the D4S, and I can actually use that battery in the D850 battery pack, and it bumps it from 7 to 9 frames a second. So it's more comparable to a higher quality motor drive. These are ermine. Ermine are just short-tailed weasels that have turned white in the wintertime. Very difficult to find, very difficult to photograph. Move so fast that it's almost beyond belief. A lot of times all you see when they race across the snow is the black tip of their tail, and getting them in your viewfinder is tough. But they're a lot of fun. Pine martens, I've seen pine martens over the years, but never really got a good photographic opportunity. Finally, this past winter in January, ran into some pine martens and got some good pine marten images. So that was nice. And I see them here in Sequoia. Sequoia, I do a lot of bear safaris up in the Sequoia during the summer, and I see pine martens up there, as well as I've seen Pacific fishers, which are up there, though I haven't got any pictures of the fisher yet. Every time I have my 3 top on the hit list animals, pine martens were on it for a while until I shot them. Mountain lions were on it for a while until I shot them. Wolverines are on it right now, as well as a Pacific fisher, and I can't remember what the third one is, but I've got a third one. Again, the weather adds an element to the pictures up in Yellowstone that just makes it so much more meaningful to me as a wildlife photographer. We always are trying to photograph interaction and behavior. Those two terms, interaction and behavior, being the two things that separate pretty average photography from a better form of wildlife photography. I shoot about 130 to 150 days a year. I have safaris every week. I just got back from Yellowstone last night. Friday, I've got a bear safari. Sunday, I've got peregrine falcons down in Los Angeles, and the beat goes on. It just continues on. I've done shows. I've been doing shows during COVID for camera clubs in the East Coast, camera clubs in the Midwest, and I've done about 50 different camera clubs in the last few months. And so it's pushed a lot of people to sign up for the newsletters, a lot of people into my photo safaris. And so the safaris right now are they may not fill up months in advance, but usually a month or 3 weeks in advance, they're full. Another mountain lion shot, the previous mountain lion shot was in Yellowstone. This mountain lion is in near Jackson, Wyoming. It's not in Grand Tetons, but it's close enough for me to call it Grand Tetons. Beautiful animal. The next picture we're going to see, I shot at ISO 52,000 in complete darkness. Not the greatest picture. I'm sure a D5 or a D6 Nikon would have done a better job. But the D4S did a reasonable job at that high of an ISO with a little bit of noise reduction. The noise reduction generally causes a little blurring, as you can see here in the sagebrush and in the snow detail. Not bad up here. It held this pretty well, but it started to break down here. And plus you can see the granularity of the image at 52,000. I could go in and reduce the noise, but in reducing the noise in the animal, you lose a lot of detail. So I just figured, what the heck, I'll leave it the way it is. And still, it's pretty dramatic. It was completely black when I shot this picture. I had to have it in live view. I had to manually, if I had to turn off the autofocus, because of course it wouldn't focus below -4 EV. And I had to manually focus, and I would rip off 10 or 20 pictures. And even at ISO 52,000, the shutter speed was around a 200th of a second. This was with my older lens at f4. So, but still, it got a reasonable picture of the moment. A lot of the prey animals we photograph on the winter safaris, a lot of the elk. I go in January. One of the reasons I go in January is because the elk and the moose have not lost their antlers yet. And so it's a more dominant kind of look to the pictures. This is a famous bull elk, number 10. I took his ear tag out. He is the elk that spent a number of years in Mammoth Hot Springs spearing cars and punching holes into the side of cars. Before the last couple of years of his life, they would hacksaw off his horns, dart him, hacksaw off his horns so he couldn't attack vehicles. He is very aggressive bull elk. And I'm back about 70 yards getting this picture, and I immediately recognized the 7x7 rack, and I wasn't getting any closer than this. But again, the winter is fun, and the roads in the northern part of the park are kept plowed and open year round. A lot of people like to do the snow coaches. I don't, because the snow coaches can't stop anywhere you see animals. They can only stop in pullouts. And if you're on a snow coach, there's 8 or 10 other people in there with you. It takes a minute or two to deload the snow coach, get your tripod set up and get shooting. And my philosophy is you've got 15 seconds from the time you see something good to you better be shooting. And that 15 seconds can't be accomplished from a snow coach. Again, here's the sagebrush. This was last year, a little bit less snow last year. So we're just under the 30-inch average, and you can see the tops of the sagebrush here, at least in this location on the Black-tailed Deer Plateau. Again, nice big elk. A lot of bighorn rams about. This is an interesting picture because the ram is actually slipping. And if you can see my mouse and you look at his front feet, you notice this foot is sideways, this foot is sideways, this foot is kicking loose. And he tumbled off this 30-foot cliff, and he went behind the tree that is leaning at an angle over here on the right. And so the camera lost focus with him because I just continued to shoot. But he landed, and that's what he looked like when he landed. He landed on all 4 feet just like a cat, and he flipped over in midair and landed on his feet. And now he's at my level, whereas before I was shooting up. Now I'm shooting straight across. And he walked off about a minute later. He stood there for about a minute, got his wits about him, and walked away. You can always tell when the rams are starting to broom their horns, depending on how tight the curl is. The tighter the curl is, as in going tighter, it starts to cut off the peripheral view with the of the eyes of the bighorn. You can see that this one is not so tight, the curl, and so he's got good peripheral view, but this one would have been up over here, and he's broomed it off by rubbing it on rocks in order to keep his peripheral vision. And that's called brooming, and a lot of big rams do that. Again, here's another couple of little guys. The way that you can tell a bighorn ram that's a full curl is you go to the end of the horn and you draw a line straight across to the other horn. And if it goes through his eyes, it's a full curl ram. And you can see that this one is quite a ways below his eyes. He's probably about a little over a half curl, but definitely not a full curl ram. People confuse, you know, I see people always labeling rams full curl rams when in reality they aren't. The reason I know that is because I started shooting for, you know, magazines back in the 80s, and you had to shoot the best animals. And after reviewing a few images of other photographers, you start to realize the quality of the animals that you need to shoot in order to get published. Again, now this is obviously a full curl ram. You draw the line and it goes through his eyes. This one probably is a full curl ram, and so there's quite a difference. Some of the smaller animals we see in the wintertime are otters. Obviously, we already saw the pine martens. We do see otters nearly every winter trip, though we don't always get pictures. It depends on access to where in the river they happen to be at when you see them. Sometimes there's 100 yards of 5 feet deep snow that there's no way in the world you're going to get your camera lens and body through. And so you're just stuck shooting great distances. This was actually fairly close. They had gone into these logs that were behind them and had been sleeping, and we got them coming out. We laid there in the sun and waited till they finally appeared in the pile of logs, and they were a lot of fun to photograph. Playing in the snow is always a big thing. Sliding on ice is always fun with otters. And of course, I've got them with fish in their mouths as well. Those I think came in the fall. This is the kind of image that a lot of people think Yellowstone is full of, but it's actually extremely difficult to get a bison that's caked with snow like this. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, you have to have fog in the valleys. So Hayden Valley, which is up in the North Road that's kept open year round, it can't just be a cold day. It can't just be 20 below. It has to have fog and mist. That mist freezes on the coat of the buffalo, and then snow needs to fall to pile up on the buffalo itself. Typically on a typical winter day, no matter how cold it is, this is more like what they look like. They have some snow on them, but they don't have a frozen snowpack on their fur like people always seem to want. So the weather conditions are really what determines whether you get bison all frosty and covered in snow or not in the wintertime. They're very warm animals, and so they produce some heat. They weigh up to 1,800 to 2,000 pounds, the big bulls, and they lose about 300 pounds of fat during the winter, but the conditions have to be right to be snowpacked. Now here you see the snow is packed around his eyes, and that's because they put their head in the snow and use it as a pile driver, snow plow, and they push the snow out of the way left to right. And so the snow gets packed around their eyes in the wintertime. Again, it was 20 below when I shot this picture of this mother with her yearling charging by, and you notice that there's no snow even though it was 20 below zero. Again, it takes that mist and fog and a little bit of snow falling to really get some snow on the coats of these buffalo. You know, it's a harsh time, and I always talk to people about there's two different kinds of photography. There's wildlife photography that's Disney oriented, where the animals all love each other, and it's all babies and flowers and stuff like that. And then there's Kodak moments when the animals are killing each other, and you want, as a wildlife photographer, you want to photograph both, because both tell a story, both are interesting. This is a situation where this doe was forced into the Lamar River by a pack of coyotes. She's freezing, she's covered in ice, she's standing in the water, lifting one leg out at a time in order to try and stay warm. But sometime during the night, she made a break for it, and she was not successful. A lot of grouse. These used to be called, well, this is a spruce grouse here. The main grouse you see in Yellowstone used to be called a blue grouse. Nowadays, they're called dusky grouse, and the blue grouse in California are now known as sooty grouse. And so on this trip over the last 2 weeks, we photographed dusky grouse a couple of different times. These are Barrow's golden eyes. There are two different kinds of golden eyes. There's common golden eyes and Barrow's golden eyes. And if you look, you see that it's kind of a high, it's got this curve to it on the males. It's kind of long, elongated kind of thing. Those are Barrow's golden eyes. If the spot was round underneath the eye, then they're common golden eyes. And we shot some great babies this year, the last week. Trumpeter swans are active all over both Yellowstone and Tetons. And when you find a body of water that's got some openings, the trumpeter swans will come and hang out. And so this is one coming into land, right next to me, almost like maybe 40 feet away, 50 feet away. American dippers, another bird that's real active in the parks. They catch mostly insects underwater. This one is catching a little trout that he had to beat to death there on the ice. And if you look at the marks over here behind the bird, you'll see that's where he was beating the fish, trying to kill it. And it was still wiggling and going and, trying to get away. But he eventually swallowed that entire fish. A lot of eagles, bald eagles, golden eagles. It's great habitat for them. And so when you find an eagle on the side of the road on a hillside that's facing the road, and you know that they need to gain a little wind under their wings, it's an opportunity for you to photograph a golden eagle coming right at you. And that's, what we all want in our photography. I spent a lot of years being a judge for PSA, especially down in the S4C, the southern counties in California. I judged maybe 8 or 10 different international wildlife photography contests for them, and enjoyed it a lot, being one of 3 judges. But if I can tell you anything about entering a contest, the picture has to have impact. It can't just be a good picture, and that's the biggest mistake that we see people make. They send in good, clean, sharp images that just have no impact. And don't enter egrets, don't enter herons, because 1,000 other people are going to enter those as well, and they've all got fish in their mouth, and they're all easy to photograph, and they're never going to score high enough to, if you guys do PSA contests, they're never going to score high enough to push you up into competition to get any kind of medal. And some of these are kind of average pictures, like this one, like the last one. I mean, not every picture has to be stunning to tell a story or be part of a collage of images that you use for something like a website or for a show. This is one of my favorite mousing coyotes. Coyotes mouse the same way red foxes do. They use their ears to triangulate. They do not jump straight up and go in with their face like foxes do. They're heavier, they're bigger, and they go at an angle, and they kind of dive into the snow more than go straight down like a red fox does. It's easier for them to get deeper into the snow because of their weight. One of my favorite pictures, I had a little fill flash on this guy. It was overcast on a winter day. All his guard hairs are out, and it looks like I saturated the colors, but that's actually what it looked like. Almost a black and white fox. Coyote. And the color was just the color that, you know, their pelts go really gray in the wintertime. And they just have a few blotches of, you know, here's the same, different coyote, different time in full light, but there's that bright red on his face and the bright red on the parts of his legs, but his body is mostly gray, black and white and gray. Fun stuff. All right, let's get to the wolves, more wolves. Now we're into spring. This is not in a river or a lake. It's just a flooded meadow. Some years when there's 6 to 8 feet of snow on the ground, by the time I start my safaris in the middle of May, there's lakes of water everywhere. And so this black wolf is crossing basically just a meadow with about a foot and a half of water in it. A lot of animals, when they try and get away from wolves, they run for the water. That's the only place that they can defend themselves in deep water, especially the elk and the moose. And so there's a lot of carcasses from elk that didn't quite make it to the river to safety. This is the alpha female, the white alpha female of the Canyon Pack, which has a den out in Hayden Valley, a little south of Lamar Valley, about 25 air miles. So we got a white wolf, we got a gray wolf, and we got a black wolf. Those are the 3 color phases of the gray wolves, the Canadian gray wolves that were reintroduced into Yellowstone in 1995. This wolf is a 271M, and I only know his name because I photographed him right next to the river up in Soda Butte Valley. And about 2 weeks ago, I was reading NPS, National Park Service bulletins, and it had a picture of this wolf, and he has these glasses around his eyes that make him a very easy wolf to identify, those white circles around his eyes. And it mentioned that he had died. Well, I went back and looked at this picture, and he died the next day after I took this picture. And he was the first wolf. This was in 2016. And this wolf was born in the park. He was 8 years old, which is about the age when they start to die. He was the first wolf to die of natural causes. Wolves are ferocious defenders of their pack territories, and 99% of the wolves in the park are killed by other wolves. And that's didn't happen with this guy. He died on a beautiful spring day in Round Prairie, not far from Pebble Creek. And so he lived out his life in his area there and died a peaceful death, curled up behind some sagebrush, which I also got a picture of. Here's another wolf on an elk kill, coyotes on a bison carcass. These are typical kind of things you see in the springtime once the snow is gone. This was back in 2008. This coyote den was really photographable, and there was about 7 or 8 of us photographers there taking pictures. And the puppies on the left are nursing from the mother. The puppy on the right is licking the jowls of the father, trying to get him to regurgitate things he's eaten, whether they be pieces of meat or voles or whatever. That's how both parents are able to feed the puppies. And there's 4 puppies in this picture. There they are, fighting each other, just like puppies do, with sharp little teeth. Here's a voling coyote, still wearing his winter coat in the spring, chomping down another vole. I was trotting along with this, along with another photographer, this coyote, and he literally caught 8 or 9 voles in a row, swallowed them down. I'm sure headed back to a den to regurgitate those to the puppies, his puppies. Both parents feed the puppies. This is an interesting picture because we see this coyote coming towards us. So I think I had 2 vehicles and I had 4 in each vehicle. So we had 8 photographers. We're all out shooting, and you can tell from this picture that this is a female. You can see her teats right down here where she's nursing her puppies. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, and of course my eye is glued to the viewfinder and I'm paying attention to this. All of a sudden, out of nowhere came a buck pronghorn that charged at the coyote. Now the coyote can turn very quickly. The pronghorn cannot turn very quickly. He's very fast on a straightaway, but can't turn very sharp. And he chased the coyote away. There was a doe pronghorn about 200 yards away giving birth to a baby fawn, and the coyote got too close, and this buck came in, pushed him away until she got driven away. Very cool. Very, very cool to see that kind of interspecies interaction. Another mouse and coyote. You know, you look at these pictures and you think, my gosh, it must be easy. But actually, you know, I think I shot a 20-shot sequence of this, and I kept exactly 2. Wasn't a lot of contrast between the subject and the background. And sometimes cameras, no matter how good they are, will lose focus lock on a subject. And when there's not a lot of contrast between the backgrounds and the foregrounds. But this was one of the sharp ones. Again, doing a mousing jump. Red foxes in the spring, and it's odd. This was an odd spring. We usually shoot 1 a day or 1 every 2 days, but we did 12 shooting days in the park. We saw 4 foxes, and we had no close encounters. And so it was really odd, because this is the kind of encounter that I'm used to. This was 2 years ago, and we shoot foxes like crazy normally. This one's shedding his winter coat. Here's one mousing in the spring. You see that he's not going. Here's one trying to crawl up on ground squirrels. You into ground squirrels in the park. Instead of mousing jumps, sometimes when the grass is green, they just crawl through it to attack their prey. When the grass is older, like in the fall, summer and fall, a lot of times they will do the same mousing jumps, because otherwise the vole hears them coming in the grass as they bend through the grass. So that's kind of cool. Here's a different shot of a different fox, but again, he's on his belly, crawling to make his attack on a ground squirrel. They're successful quite a bit. This is a black red fox that I shot in Grand Tetons. It's a melanistic red fox, also known as a cross fox. Some people call them silver foxes. They go by a number of different names, but it's just a red fox that has a melanistic gene trait. But it makes it an interesting subject when you see them. And so that it was very cool. I shot this on the June Lake Scenic Loop Road, if you know where that is. Here's another half black, half red cross fox. And he's doing a mousing jump. Unbelievable, out in the dirt. And he dove, as you can see in the picture on the right, he dove in face first. And I don't know how loose that soil was, but that had to hurt. That had to hurt his nose. And he came up with a mouse just like the one in the snow did, and enjoyed eating his mouse just out of range of our cameras in the sagebrush. This red fox is digging a squirrel, a Uinta ground squirrel, out of its hole. And for a half an hour, my group, we just stood there shooting videos and shooting stills as he worked back and forth, and finally dug out his ground squirrel and killed it and ate it right in front of us. I won't show you those pictures. They're a little more graphic. But, you know, that's the kind of thing you get in Yellowstone. It's the kind of thing you don't see in a lot of other places where the animals are more sensitive to people being around. Yellowstone, irregardless of the cars and the people, the animals are used to seeing people in the distance, used to seeing cars. They understand what roads are. All of that kind of thing is part of their natural environment. And in a lot of ways, the animals have begun to use people as a way to protect themselves and their newborn babies. So these little fawns from this mother pronghorn who just gave birth to them, you can't quite see it, but she still had a little membrane coming out back here. She just got done licking these guys. They were probably born in the morning. This is in the afternoon. They're wobbling still a little bit when they walk. But a lot of these animals, these prey animals, the elk, the moose, the pronghorn, the mule deer, they will drop their babies relatively close to the road, knowing that their prime enemies, the bears, the wolves, won't come as close to the road. And so they use the roads and the people as a safety system for giving birth. Once the little babies can run, well, then they move away and they're farther away. And now it's just a matter of outrunning, prey predators. So we get a lot of opportunity. Again, 2 very newborn pronghorn fawns. Here's another one, very newborn, probably a day old or less. Couldn't walk very well, walking between the legs of its mother. And you'll see this between the legs of its mother theme in many of my pictures. I like that effect, that protective kind of emotional look. A picture like this, while not real dramatic, not a lot of action, has an emotion to it that will drive it up in a scoring type of image. So I look for these kind of images. I generally don't enter contests. The only one I ever enter is the California Outdoors contest, because I live in California in Tulare, and they have a contest where they do every 2 months, and then the 6 bi-monthly winners face off for the wildlife photo of the year. In 2013, I had the wildlife photo of the year in California. 2016, I had the runner-up image, but they told me after 2013 they weren't going to let me win. So I kind of stopped entering their contest. Here's a buck encountering a baby pronghorn that suddenly stood. We were shooting the buck. The fawn suddenly stood up and was right there in our picture, and we didn't even see it. And the buck walked up, did a little eyeball check like this, and just walked away. The baby laid back down, waiting for its mother. Here's a couple. You stumble on these things all the time when you're out shooting other animals. You don't realize they're out there. And when you stumble across them, you just back away, shoot a few pictures, back away, and go around them. A sure sign that you've run across a badger. A good friend of mine in Visalia, Gary Kunkel, is a badger nut. And he was on the first 6-day safari this year, and luckily we got a really good badger. He loves taking badger pictures. This is a badger in Yellowstone. Here he is shaking off dirt. Here's a mother badger with, notice the claws, with another Uinta ground squirrel that has fallen prey to her digging. They can dig about 1 foot a minute in regular soil, and it doesn't take them very long. Typical ground squirrel hole is only 5 or 6 feet deep, and doesn't take them very long to dig out a squirrel. They can smell the squirrel in the hole. The squirrel is breathing. There's a scent, and they know the squirrel's in the hole, and they immediately start digging. Sometimes a squirrel has an exit hole somewhere else, and the badger can actually go sniff other holes to know which hole it is, and he will go back and forth between 2 holes. As he digs one out, he'll go check the other one to make sure the squirrel isn't trying to get away from him. These are kits. Badger babies are known as kits. There's 3 in this hole. Very cute, very susceptible to coyotes killing them. And so the mother tries to be very careful. Here's another mother with 3 kits that are a little bit older. Notice they have guard hairs out. Not as big as their mom. Here's a big male badger. Notice the claws. They have equally large teeth and are a formidable foe for coyotes, black bears, wolves. Most of those critters, while they may be able to kill a badger is going to tear them up. And so they make a choice to just let the badger go his way. Here in Sequoia, about 70% of our bears are brown. In Yellowstone, about 70% of the bears are black. So this is a rare cinnamon black bear in Yellowstone. I even photographed a blue-eyed black bear once in Yellowstone. I can't remember if the picture is in this show, but very crazy looking blue-eyed black bear. I've had people accuse me of photoshopping it, which of course I didn't do. But you see odd, amazing things. And when the bears get up in the trees, the cubs get up in the trees while the moms are feeding. And this is something that we do. I do a lot of black bear safaris in the summertime up in Sequoia. So this is a common shot for me up in Sequoia. Like I said earlier, I've got a black bear safari up there on Friday. And I do about 10 to 15 black bear days up in Sequoia during the summertime. Whereas in the wintertime here in California, I do bobcats mostly. Fun stuff. Another cinnamon bear in Yellowstone, eating some lupins. And you can see some brown hair mixed in with this black bear. He's mostly black, but he's got an underlying coat of brown. Same bear getting chased by a male bear that's actually trying to bite her on the butt. I don't know if that's meant to stop her because it was mating season. and she was trying to get away or what. They are predators. Each year, about 8,000 to 9,000 baby elk are born in Yellowstone in the Tetons, and about 50% of those calves are eaten. They provide a lot of protein, and that turns into more baby black bears, more baby wolves, more baby coyotes. And so it's a hard thing, but it's just the way it is in nature. It's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And as a wildlife photographer, we want to record all of those kinds of things. White-tailed deer are making some inroads into Yellowstone. They're a little bit hardier deer than mule deer. And so they've out-hustled the mule deer to a degree. And, you know, I don't see them every year, but I have seen them like every year or two. I'll run across whitetails in Yellowstone. Little whitetail fawn. And if any of you know Yellowstone very well, you know where Petrified Tree Road is. And I shot this right off Petrified Tree Road. And there's a difference between a real red white-tailed fawn and a real brown mule deer fawn. Springtime is fun for the yearling animals, the animals who have made it through their first winter, like these little rams. These are 2-year-old rams. They always bachelor herd up and hang out together until they become mature. And even then, they bachelor herd together until the rut. So the ewes will be together, the rams will be together right until the rut, which is in Yellowstone is in November. Also, an interesting behavioral characteristic is the fact that these bighorn sheep, especially these ewes, they babysit for other mothers. And so the mothers of all these lambs are down getting water about 100 yards away. And this mother is babysitting all the lambs because they don't need to get water because they're nursing. And so they all stuck to her like glue. They would not leave her side until their mothers came back and got them. And I thought that was an amazing behavioral thing to witness that I had never seen before. There they all are right as their mothers are starting back, and they're starting to wander over to where their mothers are coming up. Here's a newborn baby lamb along with its ewe. And they'll climb on anything to get a better view around to make sure there's no coyotes or black bears approaching them. Moose are incredibly difficult to photograph. You'd think that they're easy because they're so big, but moose kill more people in North America than any other wild animal, and you have to be extremely careful around cows with calves. And this little calf is venturing down to the edge of the water. He looks like he's about 2 or 3 days old, still wobbling a little bit, and you can see the cow in the background eating willows like all cow moose do. And here's a couple of them. Notice the size difference between these two calves. The big one is in the back, and the kind of the runt of the two is in the front, much smaller, much lighter. She's shedding after shedding off her winter fur. Here's another calf along a river. And of course, moose eat willows. So they're always found, even though they can be in forests, they're always found along rivers mostly. Here's a newborn calf elk. Again, she dropped her calf within 30 feet of the road. It's a safe place. She knows people are only going to approach so far. And she's safe from most predators. And so a lot of them have this, you know, relationship with people in the park where they use people for the safety of their newborns until they get big enough to fend for themselves and be able to run. Here's one curled up. Here's another brand new, look how wet that pelt is on that baby elk that I stumbled upon out away from the road. I was actually photographing some pronghorn, and I walked up on this baby elk just laying there. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, didn't blink. And I shot 4 or 5 frames, and I turned and walked away. Here's your typical shot. 500 millimeter lens is almost too much lens to get the bigger animals in because you have a lot of close ones, and so this is with a 70-200. Great horned owls, pretty common in the park, as are great gray owls, which are pretty common in the park. Here's one. Notice the baby has got his mother by the leg and is not letting her go until she coughs up some food. A lot of osprey in the park. We got done shooting some incredible osprey last week. We were on a nest. It's probably the best nest in North America, really, honestly. It's the road that goes by this nest is about 10 feet higher than the nest itself. The nest itself is only about 30 yards off the road, which means if you have any lens in the 300 to 500 range, it's just absolutely perfect to shoot down into the nest. The river is on the other side of the nest, and so the birds fly along the river, and they come right at you when they zoom up to land. And like I was telling the folks on the safari these last 2 weeks, you focus on the nest, you focus on the bird in the nest. You don't focus on that bird flying in, because the wing beat a lot of times will defeat the lock, the focus lock on your lens, and you let the bird fly into the range of focus, into the area of focus. Here's a nest being attacked by a third osprey. The female is the one with her wings out over the top of the nest. The male is just now lifting off from the branch with a wing beat, going full flaps, and he chased off the other osprey that's on top there. Amazing behavior, fun to see. Here's one bringing in a fish to that nest I was talking to you about. And in the afternoon, the light is right into the nest. So we try and do it in the afternoon, though. This year we ended up doing it one afternoon and one late morning for the 2 times we went by, just outside Grand Teton. Oh, National Park, excuse me for yawning. Again, the best osprey nest in North America, as you can tell from pictures like this. Shooting down slightly, the birds have to come into the nest, and it's just amazing stuff. Great gray owls are always on everybody's hit list for subjects. When I do safaris, I always ask people what their top 3, 4 animals are, birds are on the safaris, and we really try to cater to those, because a lot of people will have. I usually take 7, 8 photographers on these safaris. Sometimes spouses come, so we might end up with a group of a little bit more. But great gray owls are always on the hit list. This was near Bridge Bay, if you know where that is. There's a nesting area around there from a couple different great gray owls. And this guy's hovering, backlit by the afternoon light, and diving down numerous times. This is one that's flying from point A to point B. I was just lucky point B was just 20 yards to my left. When he took off about 30 yards away and he flew to my left about 20 yards from me, in that 30 or 40 yard flight, I ripped off 48 pictures in my D4S, and about 46 of them were sharp. And this, to me, this is the most amazing great gray owl picture, even though the hovering shot is kind of cool. This one where he's flying nearly right at me, just really one of my favorite personal shots. There's one diving off a tree branch. This is the same one just after he lifted off from a perch and is going to do a flyby. This is an American dipper, and if one thing that I do that a lot of people don't, and sometimes I can talk people into doing it on the safaris, some people I can't, is to shoot in sequences. Have your motor drive on high, doesn't matter what camera you have, doesn't matter what your frame rate is, and rip off 5, 10, 15 shots at a time, because things will happen between those images that you cannot see because of the shutter going fast in your viewfinder. The other thing is, it happens so fast that you can't hit the trigger when you do see it. It's already too late. So if you're not shooting in sequences, you're missing moments of action or moments that are unique, like this water sheeting off this dipper. And so I would never have gotten this had I been shooting 1 frame here or 2 frames there. This was in a sequence of images in the middle, and I just would never have gotten it quick enough to get it. And of course, there's a lot of birds in the parks, a lot of songbirds, and so we try and spend some time shooting the mountain bluebirds like these. There's Williamson sapsuckers, there's yellow warblers, there's a whole host of birds that we photograph in the park. Very fun to do. Everybody likes shooting birds. Birds are extremely difficult to photograph, though, and the smaller they are, the more difficult they are to photograph. The big ones are much easier to find, much easier to photograph. Cool stuff. That's called damming, when they tear the bark of a tree out like that, and the sap runs down to the bottom, and it'll catch bugs for them to eat in the sap, and that's why they do it. Very cool behavior. Williamson sapsucker. A lot of grouse in the park. Now we're in the springtime during the mating season for some of the dusky grouse. Obviously, this is a male. He can push blood up into his eyebrows and into his sockets, hair sockets there on the side, and to show that he's in breeding mode. Same thing with the spruce grouse. He's got blood coursing through his eyebrows, trying to attract some females. This one, the blood in the eyebrows is kind of dying down a little bit on this dusky grouse. So now it's orange. This is a ruffed grouse. A lot harder to find ruffed grouse, not so common, but I probably have gotten most pictures in Grand Tetons, fewer pictures in Yellowstone of ruffed grouse. And of course there's sage grouse there as well, though I've only shot sage grouse in Grand Teton National Park. Harlequin ducks are a treat. They're an ocean-going duck from farther north. They come down as far as Yellowstone's Lee Hardy Rapids on the Yellowstone River in the springtime. We shot them this year. We shot them last week. And this is one on the rocks. This is one of those situations where you see the beauty of a moment. You want to blur the water, but you want the bird sharp. There was just enough light that I had to drop down. I think I was shooting ISO 50. I was shooting at about a 20th of a second at f4. The bird was out in the river about 35 yards. And so at a very slow shutter speed. And even though I'm shooting on a tripod, you're going to get blur. Just putting your hands on the camera is going to give you blur. Just the shutter going off is going to give you a little bit of blur. So this is actually the best frame out of 80 shots that I took of this bird. And I shot him in groups of about 10. And this is the one that I like the most, with the water, the spray, the bird being sharp, the drake. And of course the hen duck is plain, like most hens are. But the rock is very sharp, and the water's got a nice motion to it. One of my favorites there. We also get a lot of common mergansers. This is a female common merganser also hunting at Lee Hardy Rapids for fish in the falls, in the rapids. There they are when they get up out. Sometimes they'll push the harlequin ducks away. They're a little more aggressive than the harlequins. These are females. The male is big and white. Can't mistake the male. There he is right there. Just gorgeous bird with some nice color in the water for me. Again, this is a dusky grouse. This is a female doing a little drumming. They drum as well as the males, and kind of a wing stretch drum. I don't shoot ravens very often, but it's hard to pass up a nest with a bunch of little babies. This is reverse window photography. This is where instead of the window frame being in front of your subject, the framing is in the back of the subject. And in this case, it's the female cow buffalo. They're not buffalo, they're bison. I should say bison. They're not buffalo. Just like pronghorn antelope are not antelope. They're just pronghorn. The correct usage is just pronghorn. But I like the highlights. One of the key things you need to be able to do on a wildlife safari is adjust your exposure compensation. This is +1 1/3 in order to get that nice burn around the head and yet get detail in the fur, shooting almost directly back into the sun. So using compensation is really important. Being able to judge those situations where you need to use it is a matter of practice, but it sure comes in handy. Front lit one. And again, the baby between the mother's legs are actually under the mother's beard. One of my favorite pictures that I've ever taken of a buffalo, that is. Interaction between mother and baby. Again, interaction and behavior are always big subject things we're looking for. That's a bull. Can't mistake him for anything. They're big. They're dominant. They're mostly passive until they're mad. Then they're not passive. That shows you the difference in size between the bull in the middle and the two cows. They go into heat usually in July August, sometimes end of June, or even into the middle of September, depending on the cows. Even in September, you'll have babies being born from cows that were mated late in the year, the previous year. Here's one swimming across the Yellowstone River. Just a cool shot. He swam right to me. I couldn't believe it. Ended up having to back away. Weasels are one of the smaller but deadlier killers that you see around. They are bloodthirsty little animals and beautiful. We already saw the white version of this short-tailed weasel. Here he is going into Uinta ground squirrel colony and killing these little baby newborn Uinta ground squirrels. Pika are another smaller animal that we get in the park. Both parks at higher elevations, and just fun to photograph them. And we focused a couple of hours on these pikas on this safari this last week. I had a lot of people that wanted to shoot pika, so we spent some time. There's 3 or 4 really good places to shoot pika in Yellowstone. All you have to do is stand there every now and then, make squeaking noise with your mouth, and they'll come and look, do their thing right in front of you. This is kind of an interesting shot of a beaver. He's got his tail up. He's using it as a rudder to steady himself while he's underwater, cutting up whatever vegetation he was cutting up. And while I've shot a lot of beavers, this is my favorite picture because it's something unique. You don't see the tail up like that. He's not splashing like an emergency tail splash would be. Snowshoe hares are in the park. This is in the springtime, so that he's partly gray. He'll eventually turn all brown and gray, but in the wintertime he's all white, much like the weasel. Changes colors in the season. A lot of grizzly bears, and we shot a ton of bears this year. This is not 399, even though there's 4 cubs here. You can see these 3 pretty obvious, but there's the 4th cub right there and right there, and here are all 4 of those cubs. So it's not 399. A lot of people think, oh, it must be 399. No, this was in 2010, and we called her just the quad sow because she had 4 cubs. This was in Yellowstone, whereas 399 is in Grand Teton National Park. I have photographed 399, but I've never gotten pictures like this with her cubs. You know, it's like there's 2 in the bush, 2 in the open. The two in the open go back in the bush. The other 2 come out, and I've never been able to get all 4 of the cubs like I have been able to with this sow back in 2010.
What do you mean by 399?
399 is the number of a bear. I guess she has an ear tag. I've never seen it, but she's bear 399. Some people they use the name, the number of the animal. I prefer the number of the animal if it has a number. I do not use names. And so people have come up to me, oh, is this name of the bear? That, you know, it's like a pet name. And I do not use pet names on wild animals like grizzly bears. I don't care a rat's butt if people identify animals by their cute little pet name. I will not use them. And, you know, these animals are big, mean, ornery animals. And I've had people come up to me and say, oh, is this bear? And I'll tell them, no, it's a wild grizzly bear. Oh, well, I've shot this bear, you know, a dozen times. It's nice. It's never mean and never acts out around people. And, you know, that's ridiculous because you meet that same bear where there's not 100 people photographing it. You meet it out on a trail in the backwoods, and if that bear's in a bad mood, you're dead. And that's just the way it happens. And I get tired of this attitude that these bears are pets and that, oh, we got to go shoot this bear. She's such a good mother. You know, that's just a lot of people trying to put human emotions onto bears. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly. This is the dangerous bear ripping down the dangerous bear sign. I call this my grizzlies in the mist moment. There was a sow with 2.5-year-old cubs. Grizzly bears kick their cubs loose at 2.5, go into breeding. Black bears kick their cubs loose at 1.5 and go into breeding. And this is a 2.5-year-old. The mother's just out of sight with the other sibling. ripping down the dangerous bear, warning that dangerous bears frequent this spot. And it actually tore the sign off. Then it broke the 2x4 off. So the bear did a good job of demolishing the warning sign. Beautiful sow bear out in the spring flowers. A couple of her cubs behind her. Again, here's another shot of a sow grizzly with her cub, one of her cubs right between her legs. You know, is there any safer place in North America than that position right there? 450 pound sow. You know, people always overestimate the size of bears. A big boar grizzly's 500, 550, maybe 600 if it's the biggest bear in the park. Sow grizzlies are generally 250 to 400 pounds. And you know, when you see them side by side, you realize that most of it is fur. They have a lot of muscle mass. They don't have so much fat until the fall, but fun image. I enjoy this image. I actually shot this bear and these two cubs. This was taken 2 years ago when these were cubs of the year. I shot them a couple days ago as 2.5-year-olds with this sow. And we got almost an hour with them at about 40 yards, 50 yards. I mean, the light wasn't this good, but still it was an amazing encounter, a lot of amazing pictures. If you go to Facebook, and my business name is Brent Paull Photography, you can like Brent Paull Photography, just click the like button, and you'll see the pictures that I post from the photo safaris. I'll usually post 1 or 2 a day, just letting people know kind of what we're seeing before I do my newsletters. And again, I encourage you to, if you're into wildlife photography, to sign up for a newsletter. You can always unsubscribe later on if you don't feel like it's your kind of thing. But I'll make references to trips and pictures from the previous 2 weeks. I shoot so much that every 2 weeks I've got a new handful of pictures talking about the safaris. I also talk about pieces of equipment, support equipment, tripods, all those kinds of things. So, you know, it's some local information for those of us here in the valley. Mating pair of grizzly bears, the male's on the left, female's on the right. You can see the size difference there. And yet people were coming by when the sow, you couldn't see the male, he was out of sight. The sow was out grazing and they were like, oh my gosh, that bear is 400 or 500 pounds. When in reality, she was about 250 pounds. Okay, this is one of those bears that shall remain nameless. You could probably guess her name by her very light pelt. I photographed this bear as a cub. I photographed it as a 2-year-old. I photographed it as a 2.5-year-old. This is when she was full 3. She'd already been kicked loose by her mother, but she was staying in the same general area that she grew up in. I did not see her, though, this spring. So she has gone out and established her own territory someplace. And I know she got mated last year, so she probably has cubs. This is that same bear that will go unnamed with her mother that will go unnamed. And I always laugh at people when they say, oh yeah, these bears are so mild and so nice. And these bears were very photographable. They would be 50 yards from the road, 30 yards from the road on the north shore of Yellowstone Lake, all the way around Lake Butte overlook, maybe up a mile or 2 towards Sylvan Lake. And, you know, I've shot them many times, probably 10 or 12 times in the last 3 years, point blank like this. And the mother of the bear on the right, now the bear on the left is a 2.5-year-old. That's her mother on the right. The mother's mother, so the grandmother of the blonder bear, you know, ate a hiker in the middle of Yellowstone about 8 years ago and had to be euthanized. And so they're not tame, they're not pets. And, you know, I guess that example kind of shows that no matter what people think, because there's 50 of you standing there taking pictures that it's a mild bear, well, it's always a mild bear when there are a lot of people around. No group of people have ever been attacked by a grizzly bear, which is why they tell you to hike in groups, photograph in groups in Yellowstone and the Tetons, just for safety. Fun stuff. Yellowstone National Park left out one of their snowmobiles, and this grizzly sow found the snowmobiles and just ripped this snowmobile apart. Ripped the seat apart, broke the window. She just had a fun time tearing up this snowmobile. I posted this picture on Facebook that night, and the next day Yellowstone Park must have seen it, and they had removed the snowmobile. Same bear. This is actually the quad mom from 2010. This is 2016. She had 2 cubs, one here marching right by her face, the other one right here in the background. She had been in a fight with a boar. Look at this big patch taken out over her eye. People had reported to me that both cubs had been killed because that's what males do to try and force the female back into heat. But she had actually defended her cubs successfully, and they were all together. That patch over her eye grew in, and I shot these 3 bears again in the fall, and that patch of fur had completely grown back. Here's one that had wandered too close to a porcupine, apparently wanted to investigate the porcupine, and got a face full of quills for her effort. Eventually, these quills will fester and pop out, but she's going to be in for some pain, this little 3.5-year-old grizzly. Already kicked loose by the mother, but still it was hanging with its sibling. Here's a sow with 2 cubs right on the edge of a 200-foot cliff right at sunrise, literally within 10 seconds of the sun coming up. I'd seen these bears and been out, not really following them, but trying to shoot for position. And the sun came up and boom, what an amazing, amazing shot. I would have loved the cubs to be looking at me, horse playing, doing something other than being partly out of the picture. But still just a great shot, a lot of fun. Okay, so now we're going to get into fall. We've been talking for 1 hour and 10 minutes. I know you guys are probably getting tired of all this, and so I'll go a little bit quicker. Red fox mousing. This one's mousing off a rock, and I love the shadow. I love the background shadow of the fox mousing into the sun. And again, you know it's in the fall, late summer, fall, because now the grass is all brown. It all dries up in the fall. Whoops, same picture. Let's go the other way. Another red fox. Bull moose with fall colors in Grand Teton National Park. That's probably the biggest bull I've ever photographed. I don't shoot Alaska. I just shoot the Rocky Mountains back to California. So I just shoot the American West. That's my area. And this is the biggest bull moose I've ever photographed. Another nice bull.
How big was it?
This is a cow with a couple of 2-year-old yearlings. Another bull crossing a river. Another bull out in breeding during breeding season in the fall in October. There's actually a female about 50 yards away, and he's watching her walk away. We shoot wolves in every season, winter, spring, summer. We don't always get shots like this where he's got an elk rib in his mouth and he's surrounded by other wolves, but very cool. Here's one carrying away the leg of an elk with a lot of meat attached. This is the alpha female with one of her 5-month-old puppies, and amazing how they look so much alike. You know, just kind of a mother-daughter, mother-child similarity. This is the best adult baby wolf picture of not just a baby wolf out of a den, you know, but actually an adult female alpha along with a grown-up baby that's actually following the pack hunting elk. This is the best shot I've ever seen, and I was lucky enough to take it. Really just a lucky kind of thing. But like with all wildlife photography, the more hours you spend in the field, the more luck you have. Again, fall day up on the mountains, everything's yellow. The grass is all yellow in the background. Late afternoon sun, and this bighorn ram was only about 50 feet away from me. And again, he's a full curl. You can draw that line through his eyes. More otters. And again, if you're not shooting in sequences, you'll never get a picture like this with the water splashing in the air as they fight and play. Because when you see it, it's too late to push the trigger to get it. And so you've got to be shooting in 5-10 picture sequences. And I literally, you know, I've got almost 1 million pictures on my D4S, and it sounds like an M60 machine gun going off. There's nothing quiet about it anymore. I shoot my D850, which is relatively new. It's nearly silent compared to my D4S. But those 12 frames a second, you know, just can't be beat in some situations. Like, again, like this. When that tail splash, you push the trigger, it's too late. There's an otter underwater. I thought that was kind of cool. Black bear's in the berries. Notice the berries around him. He's in a rose bush area where there's a lot of rose hips around. And there he is eating rose hips. This is a different bear. But the fall through October is a lot of, every plant has berries just about. We still get some warm days, even in September, early October. And the bears will use the lakes like Floating Island Lake, like Rainy Lake, Blacktail Ponds, Phantom Lakes if they have water in them. They'll get in there and cool off like this. This is down in the Tetons. These are hawthorn berries from a hawthorn tree. And you got to know where those 10 or 12 acres of hawthorn berries are in Tetons. And you go there in the fall when the berries are ripe, and there's berries all over them. Easy. Here's one actually. Here's a second-year cub, and he's actually about 15 feet off the ground. These are not very big trees, and he's up there pulling berries off in the higher branches. And, of course, the mule deer are in the rut. Necks are swollen. Found in both parks. If you want to know where the biggest mule deer bucks I've ever seen are, it's Mesa Verde National Park in Colorado. I do a safari there I don't know what that buzzing noise is. In the fall, I do the San Juan Mountains, and it's amazing. One of the days we spend in Mesa Verde, and they literally have the biggest bucks I've ever seen. I've shot 8x7s, 8x6s. That's the biggest pronghorn buck I've ever seen. And he's got a good 16, 17 inch horn there. This is in the Tetons. And again, they like to climb rocks, just like the bighorn. They like to see around them. They can see wolves or coyotes coming, and they're very fast. A lot of birds in the fall. Again, eating on a carcass, this bald eagle. This one's hovering, coming down to a carcass. Gray owl in the fall. Look at the talons on the front of that. I mean, look at how he tucks them in and goes right down on top of the bulls. Very cool. The elk rut is on in September, October. This bull is in a pit, tearing it up with his horns and stomping around, and they urinate on themselves. They want the cows to smell them, because the cow will go into heat quicker if she smells the bull elk, and it makes it more conducive for mating. Another big bull. A lot of people don't understand how racks work on elk. A mature bull is 6x6. Anything lower than that, 6x5, 5x5, 4x5, 4x4. Those are immature bulls. Most cows will not allow themselves to be mated by a substandard bull. They can tell the difference. They know the deal. And this is a big 6x6 harem bull elk. When they go above 6s, they're called monarch bulls. And then there's another word for 8-point bull elk, and I can't remember what that is off the top of my head. I've only shot one 8x8, and he made it on the cover of Bugle magazine, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Here's a bull out wandering around with his harem of cows. This curve, if you can see my mouse, this curve is known as a whale tail. And the longer the whale tail, the more valuable that picture is for a magazine. So he's got a very short little whale tail, but if it went out here 5 or 6 more inches and curved like that, that would make that 6x6 bull a very valuable picture, because that's one of the criteria that hunting magazines in particular use to gauge the quality of a bull, is how long the whale tail is. It's also known as a drag tine. It's easy to count the horn on an elk. The tall vertical tine right here is always the 4th tine. There it is on the other side. And that is actually called the royal tine. And so you don't have to count these. You know that that's the 4th tine, 5, 6. Real easy. You can count them from a long, long way away. Here's a bugling bull elk in the fall. Beautiful rack, beautiful light. Here's a couple of bulls fighting. They're both 6x6s. See that whale tail on this one? Look how much longer that is. This is actually a 7x6, and it makes this picture a very valuable picture should I ever submit it to a hunting magazine. Coming through the snow. Again, I told you, I love the weather. I love the effect of weather in pictures. I love when it snows in September or October. It doesn't always. About 1 out of every 5 or 6 years, it'll snow in the fall during the elk rut, but it adds an element of weather that the picture wouldn't have otherwise. Grizzly bear sound asleep on a log. This is one of the bears that shall remain nameless. This is a different bear, just a big old boar, probably around 400, 450 pounds. And yes, they can squeeze through little holes in logs like this. This is actually taken at the end of August, and it can snow anytime. It can snow in June, it can snow in July, it can snow in August, so it can happen anytime. Okay, this is that blonde bear I was telling you about that shall remain nameless. This was that bear as a cub of the year. A little bit chunky, putting on some fat. This was in October, so it's beefed up. It looks like it weighs about 40 pounds, and it'll go into hibernation with its mother. And the next year it'll be 100 pounds, 125. The final year it'll be about 200, 225 pounds. And when she kicks it loose, it'll be right around 250. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I am going to go off. I'm going to rely on anybody who wants to ask questions. I will go into the chart, let me get rid of this thing. And let me go to the, well, now I can't even find the chat line. But if you talk to Jonathan, I've got Jonathan on the phone on speaker, and so I will hear his questions if anybody has them.
You did a great job, Brent. I appreciate you helping out tonight. Amazing pictures, really wonderful. I've been on a couple of trips with Brent, and they've all been pretty darn good. He really loves his animals. It's just a lot of fun. So many questions here now. I'll pass them on.
And I've got the chat line up now, so if they want to just type a question in the chat line, they can do that.
You just type a question in the chat line and he will answer.
No, I don't see any questions. Maybe I've answered everybody's question.
You made quite an impression, my friend.
Well, great. I appreciate it. I hope everybody gets out and shoots. Wildlife photography is an amazing thing. And I will leave you now. You can always email me if you have questions about products or lenses or tripods. I answer a lot of questions. And like I say, I've done a lot of shows for clubs all over the United States. So I hope everybody has a good night, and I'll turn you back over to your club for your club business.
Thanks, Brent.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I really enjoyed that.
Absolutely.